Alright, and yes, I don't seem to change my shirt ever. Certain clothes I wear around the house. Well, usually I don't wear much of anything. But it's just not going to get dressed for you, right? Okay. Anyway, doing the walkthrough Ahistory, and there's a little bit of a There's a little bit of a slide between things. I'm still in the middle of Axis Empires. I'm not always in the mood to play, to be recording my playings. And I've kind of fallen behind in terms of my bandwidth. I have little bandwidth, but I've managed to exceed my production capacity with my upload capacity. So I figured I'd use the rest, wow, that's kind of cool, the rest of, or some of my bandwidth on this. Let me go through a few of these games here. Now, science fiction in general, you can break it into some categories, and that's something I'm thinking about doing in here, because you have your hard science fiction, and you have kind of your space opera type stuff. Then you have things that are sort of fixed on certain universes, like you could say, well, Star Wars is its own little classification of it or whatever. Then you have stuff that could really be anything, right? So let's take a look at one of the first games. This is Adventure by Yaquinto. It's a little tactical barroom brawling in the far future. I don't have this rated. I don't know if I've ever played it. I think I tried it once. It's been a long, long time, and my wife is kind of pushing me to get this played. So you might actually see a first playing in a long time. I don't remember being terribly impressed with it. I may have just looked at the rules and said, this isn't worth it. Okay, Amoeba Wars. Now, I have this listed as Avalon Hill and also Reader Games. I don't know what Reader Games is. I have the Avalon Hill version. This is a really... it's kind of a... I'm trying to remember the game that it's kind of like that I played recently. It reminded me a little bit of Throne War that I played recently, where you've got kind of this external position on a board, and you're trying to kind of, to some extent, Twilight Imperium too. You're trying to get yourself into the center for various reasons. In the case of Amoeba Wars, controlling enough of the central planets gives you a victory. And most of it is just kind of this, most of the rules are basically just this space. I move around and can fight the other players and produce spaceships, all very at a simple level, or all at a very simple level. Yet, there's this one twist to the game, which is these giant space amoebas, which you can defeat, but they're not, they're fairly tough, and they add a lot to it in the sense that if you look at Space Empires 4X, some of the nasty stuff that's out there is on the same level as these. And there's also doomsday machines in this that are out to destroy anything they face. They were built to destroy the amoebas. Awful Green Things from Outer Space. I have to get this sucker on film. This is one of my favorite games, actually, surprisingly enough. I've rated this a 9. I believe that it's completely unbalanced in favor of the crew. On the other hand, I've never been beaten in it. I've played 20 times since I started recording against 8 different people. Beyond that, I've played other people as well. I think if you know what you're doing and you plan for it, the crew should never lose. But, I don't know, some people seem to think differently. Azanti High Lightning. So this is off the Traveler role-playing game, kind of, within a boxed game. And you also have Snapshot, which has a similar rules set. Azanti High Lightning gave you 16 or 30-something maps or something of this big cruiser to fight different battles out on. Really kind of neat idea there. And it gave you a tactical system, something that Traveller as a role-playing game, you'd think most role-playing games are very good at that. Well, Traveller was not. Traveller said, okay, I take a piece of paper and I draw 3 lines on it, and you're at close range, medium range, far range on each side of it, and you just interact with each other from that. Very, very abstract. I've never seen a role-playing game pull this off in that sort of way. And it's kind of funny because their space combat included in the base game was the most detailed space combat I think I've ever seen. There may be some exceptions, but for vector movement and it handled vector movement in the most complete manner that I've ever seen. Let's just put it that way. Open-ended in all ways. You could put it on any kind of planet. And, it just gives you the physics, basically. The rest of the game system, well, there were a lot of kind of looser ends in it. But anyway, Azanti High Lightning gives you a tactical system that is not far from what you'd expect in kind of a one-to-one board gaming type situation. It's lighter than you'd expect in a role-playing game, but still heavier than Traveller gave you. Battlefleet Mars. This was such a weird game. It's covering this revolt of of some of the outer planets from Earth's control. But what's really cool about this one is that you're keeping track of the positions of all the planets in their orbits as time passes. And the orbits make planets go out of sync. It's not some sort of fixed distance between planets that a lot of system-based games have. And because it covers several years easily, there's actually quite a bit of room for these planets to get into very different positions. And there's could be a lot more strategic thinking based on that, where that can really affect when you can hit and everything, the same way, say, weather would over on the Pacific front. Battlesuit, this is something that grew out of the Ogre universe. I don't think I've ever played it. It's man-to-man combat. The map really bugged me. The rules didn't look exciting enough to actually put together something with little paper counters on a map that pooched up and flipped them over. Carpe Astra. This is a recent game. I've seen people selling it for $20 or something, but one of the game sites had it on sale for $7 recently. I picked it up that way. It's okay. It's this little political manipulation type game. It feels kind of Euro-ish. You're positioning pieces. It actually felt a little bit like Hive to me. But for no good reason. You're just positioning pieces to try to collect points. There's a limited pool of points, and you're trying to collect them by playing cards which trigger where your agents are. It's a neat little game. Chrononauts I did a video on already. This is this is the first of the time games that I ever saw that sets up maybe the only one that sets up sort of this continuum of events. Unfortunately, it's a very limited continuum. It's from Lincoln's assassination, more or less, maybe a little before that, up until 2010 or something. I don't know. And it's only focused on American history or things that heavily influenced American history. The fact, though, that it is this continuum and that you break one thing and it affects other things, that's awesome, but nearly everything's binary, which is you break something, there's a fix for it, there's a very limited number of cards here. It's a cool idea. They haven't proven out that you can do it for something impressive yet. All they've done is this kind of neat card game level thing, which is a fun card game in and of itself, but I was hoping that the system would just trigger something off on me and say, here is how you do the time game that I'm looking for. Colony Delta, this is by Fantasy Games Unlimited. This is you have 2 races kind of fighting over a planet where they're trying to mine. And you can use military resources, but you also have a lot of productive resources, a lot of productive actions that you can do in it, building factories, etc. Think of it almost like a one-planet version of a Stellar Conquest type thing. It's only 2 players, though. I thought it was a lot of fun, actually, and an interesting idea that held out pretty well. My ex-wife liked it even more. 4000 AD, I did this on video. This is a weird game. You send ships out. You got to see the video to get the full explanation, but you send ships out. You don't have to know where they're going, but including which direction they're heading in, right? But once they get far enough that you want them to have landed, well, you can just land them wherever you like and attack that planet. Really weird thinking involved in getting this one going. And this is actually a game I had lost and had to repurchase in the used market. I liked it enough to do that. There aren't a lot of these big box games, but it's a weird company. Company War, this is based on a C.J. Shelley story, Down Below Station, and there may be others in the series. Turns out, though, this is really a cool space naval strategic level game where tactical combat is handled like in other Mayfair games. Let's think Falklands War or something, with a lot of die rolling, a lot of stuff. Luckily, there aren't a lot of ships in the game, and there's really a good feel for sort of the strategic elements of an island hopping type of campaign, what that would kind of translate to in space. I think they did a pretty good job on this. Again, a good rating on this one, especially from me. Other people didn't like it so much. Cosmic Encounter, this is a classic. I have several versions of this. Well, I think only 2, actually. I have not the original Eon version, but they released it just before they got rid of it in the big box. And I thought, oh, this is excellent. I've got this big box. I can put all the expansions in it when I get them. I'm golden, man. Well, I wasn't able to find a single one of the bloody expansions early on. And then as I, when I did find a big number of them at the Complete Strategist, I didn't have a wad of cash in my hand to pay for stuff. I bought some stuff, but I didn't buy anything for Cosmic Encounter. I could have bought, I think, 5 of the expansions. I think that's what they had left at that point. And they would have been about $5 each. That was a decent amount of money to me back at that time. I'm in college, whatever. I didn't want to spend it. I wanted to wait until I could get them all. Well, that point has never come. So I have this big box that's just a basic game. And then I have an Avalon Hill re-release, which I've heard is really bad. And the Mayfair releases, I think I didn't like what they did to the game. They ruined it with the flares. They took so much of the chaos out of the old Cosmic Encounter that I suspect that any more recent version of the game is probably damaged beyond belief at this point. I want my old game back. I want the whole, I want all those excellent rules that just created chaos back in play, that created situations maybe that were auto wins for some players. So what? And I never saw one that was. Some of the illegal combinations, even when you looked at them, you said, hell with this. Diadem, another Fantasy Games Unlimited space game, is a space exploitation and conflict. Sort of standard style of game. I remember the graphics to this not being terribly good. It was actually a fairly solid entry. I didn't rate it too well because of the graphics, but I know at least one of my friends rated it very well for that. Dune. And I don't know what I have here. Age, future pastimes, I don't know. I have the Avalon Hill version. I actually have multiple copies of it. I also have Spice Harvest and Duel. I may have multiple copies of some of them. I'm not positive. This is sort of this was such an exciting game when it came out, and it still apparently attracts a lot of interest. I've heard that the Fantasy Flight Games or whatever is putting out a Twilight Imperium-based version on it to get around the copyright limitations. What I saw of their intro didn't look like Dune to me. It looked like something with lots of cheesy plastic in it, I'm not sure that they could have maintained it. I'm not sure. Dune was a very simple game, okay? I mean, you just grabbed counters, you paid to put them on planet. Whoever had the most didn't just win. You had this dial where you dialed how many you're risking, well, not just risking, how many you're committing to die if you win. That was such a cool little aspect, but you also had these weapons and defenses and cards that got revealed along with your attack. You had money that got revealed. I suspect that element is still there, but who knows how well the interaction of, say, player powers is going to work. Yes, to some extent, some of them may be mapped over fairly well, but honestly, I thought Dune was pretty awesome as a game, and I'm certainly not going to go buy another version of it, but I'm also not completely convinced that someone reprinting it without just a straight reprint is going to do a particularly good job. It's an interesting thing with this. The Spice Harvest and Duel expansion cards don't match the deck well. On the other hand, cards put out by the Space Gamer in one of their issues match it almost absolutely perfectly on the back, which is kind of an interesting situation. I can strongly suggest not to play all three, Spice Harvest, Duel, and Dune together. You could have a very, very broken game that way. In fact, Spice Harvest is probably the most damaging of the expansions, but the base game is probably the best game out of the bunch. I still like playing the expanded versions though, and I'll probably do that. TSR's Gamma Marauders. Okay, you're playing these giant mutant critters bouncing around the board. They have popcorn, which is just human troops. This is one of the popcorn games if you're interested in popcorn games. And they're looking for pods. Pods. They're able to use pods in combat, and they can also use them to either buy equipment or popcorn. And this is big for being very silly looking. It's one of the games with killer penguins in it. Interesting game. I didn't rate it terribly well. I gave it a 4, but I thought it was cute. My ex-wife gave it like a 7, I think, for the cuteness factor. Federation and Empire. This is SFB's sort of grand campaign. I used it as a scenario generator. I don't think it worked very well as a game itself. There was nothing terribly wrong with it. It just didn't excite me. The production, the combat, this, that, and the other. It was just long and drawn out and pretty boring. But as playing the same game where you fought out every SFB scenario, that was just pure gold. And I really loved doing that. Fifth Frontier War, GDW. Traveler Universe again. This is going to be the Imperium and the Zodani facing each other. What's really cool here is it uses this pre-plotted movement system. And there was enough going on and enough time before the plots. So you'd plot your move X number of turns in advance based on the leader's rating. And for the most part, you completely forgot what the other guy's actually doing. Or yourself, for that matter. But it was just really hard enough to keep track of that it was almost trivial to solo this thing, even though it was double blind and this, that, and the other. Freedom in the Galaxy. This is the SPI game, and I have the Avalon Hill reprint. This is sort of a space opera game based heavily on Star Wars world, whatever, universe. A little bit of a joking look to it, but basically you have these bunches of rebel characters running around from planet to planet trying to set off a rebellion. That's what the game claims to be about. And, they're trying to improve their chances, grow their groups, and eventually topple the Empire. The game makes it sound like the Imperium has no chance. Well, I've never played a game where the rebels didn't just get squashed. However, the last game that I played with my current wife was very, very enlightening. Towards the end of that, she showed me a trick that might just be the way to keep the rebels together, keep the rebels from getting wiped out, which is they start in 4 corners of the map, bringing them together into one area, an area where the Imperium can't do much. do as much as they can and then move on. Do as much as they can and then move on. Where they can support each other and interact with each other, I think may be the secret to preventing them from getting wiped out. I don't know for sure. This game's got a 9 for me just because of the scope and the character element is done so well in this compared to, say, War of the Ring. Galactic Destiny, I put this one up on vid. This has not, I haven't played this opposed. It's a political style game. You have this kind of balance between this evil force that you have to wipe out or prevent from taking over your universe, and just making sure that I'm still videoing. I look like I have to stop pretty soon, so I'll come back with some more. Alright, let's try this some more. I don't know how well it's going to work. Anyway, we were talking about Galactic Destiny. For Galactic Destiny, it's this political game where you're seeking to gain control of this, I don't know, federation, whatever, for your political party. And largely you can use political means to do this, although it is possible to use military ones and may be advantageous. But using military means sort of illicitly means that you end up causing this darkness to grow within the empire as a whole, or whatever, within the republic as a whole. And it does have that sort of flavor, again, of a Star Wars-ish, but more modern Star Wars-ish. Freedom of the Galaxy came out right after the Star Wars, right, where the whole world was sort of affected by this to some extent. All the gaming industry just took kind of a, ooh, science fiction is more than just a niche now. Well, this one follows the more recent ones, and you have this sort of darkness corrupting these different senators. And what you can do with that is it actually gives you some potential bonuses and some malices in terms of conducting events. And they all sort of almost balance out. Each senator in this game has special abilities, etc. It's an interesting game. I didn't give it a rating yet, but I probably gave it one on the Geek. It feels not quite like it works. It doesn't feel like it's right up there and ready to be played the way, say, Republic of Rome does, even though it's sort of like Republic of Rome in space. However, I think there's a pretty good game somewhere underneath there. It's just it needs some tweaking and some work. GDW's Imperium, I kind of enjoyed playing this. I only did it the one time. This was a new game to me. I liked the political aspect of, between the wars, where not real politics, but where you get to roll a die and kind of see what happens there and whether or not your sector is getting the forces that it needs. The whole fact that there's multiple wars being fought, that you're not the entire force of the empire, and that you don't have full control over what's going to happen, but you're in place over a period of time to see what happens. Well, that element is kind of interesting to the game, and it adds something that most space games just don't have. It's got a different take than this sort of two great empires going against each other all out. Invasion Earth. So this is from the Soleimani Rim War from the Traveller universe. This is not a good game, folks. It's about the invasion of Earth. The combat system is very similar in a lot of ways to Azanti High Lightnings, and maybe even Imperium's. More like Azanti High Lightnings, though, where you put step losses under the units. But it just ends up not feeling terribly good to me. I've given this a big old 3 because it was that painful. There aren't a lot of games that get that kind of rating from me. John Carter, Warlord of Mars. This is a SPI game. It's got two different games. One's the character game and one's the military game. The military game is kind of uninteresting. You're fairly high level, abstracted. You're flying your ships back and forth and trying to capture cities using the same map as in the character game. But in the character game, this is what's really cool, or where this game shines. Each player is playing their own character, but they're also playing a villain for another one of the players. And as the villain, one of their goals is to make things hard on the other player. You're not really able to take the other players out. This was a real lot of fun in terms of just sitting down with a few other players and just the sort of the kick of what could happen, because really terrible things can happen. I was playing, I think it's John Carter actually, but one of the characters has a dog, basically, who just kept saving me, and everybody was making fun of that. But you have sort of this, your true love that you've got to hunt down, and you've got to find her, and you've got to rescue her, and the villain is constantly trying, to do unspeakable acts to her. Problem with the game? Each of the encounters, it feels pretty much the same. Oh, look, I'm fighting 20 red Martians. Oh, look, I'm fighting 20 red Martians. Oh, look, I'm fighting 17 red Martians. Different locations, different this, that, and the other. But all this story stuff that comes through in, say, Tales of the Arabian Nights is sort of missing here. All this ends up being is, hey, let's take these cool stories and make a pure combat scenario out of them and ignore most of the story stuff. And I think that's kind of a sad factor about it. Ogre GV. This is Steve Jackson Games. I know a lot of people have good memories of this one. I never really liked it. Maybe it's because I started off with real war games first. It always seemed like, cheesy components, and I didn't mind them so much in Car Wars because Car Wars brought something new to the table. But to me, it brought kind of a cheap theme that wasn't as exciting as, American Civil War, say, or Napoleonics. Yes, it's a science fiction-y theme, but it brought kind of a puzzle game to the table, especially the original Ogre, where you're setting up, okay, I got an ogre, and the other guy is trying to figure out the force pool to defeat that ogre. It's almost a solitaire game, because, as long as you don't act stupid with the ogre, there's not much it can do. And not a lot of strategy there. The strategy all sits on the non-ogre player. Now, GEV took the game, he took away the biggest bonus that the GEVs had, therefore they had to name it after it or something, which was sort of this ability to run up, shoot, and run away, and get out of range and not take any penalty for shooting. Now, that was a little goofy, and it worked fine in Ogre, but it no longer worked in GEV, which added lots and lots more units, different terrain, this, that, and the other. Different kinds of scenarios where you're no longer an ogre facing a bunch of defenders. And no real problem with that side of it. I think it's a slightly more interesting, more wargamey type feel than the original Ogre, which felt like a puzzle game. But it still didn't, quite do it for me. I could see if you hadn't, if you didn't have anything that had better components or whatever, that you would have gone for this pretty big. And I can definitely see the attraction to someone who didn't have access to stuff that was more polished. Just like there's people, I still have fonder memories of my old SPI games than I do of some of the newer stuff that's in much, much better production quality. But I'm sure other people looking back would say, the thing is, Ogre came out at the same time as better stuff was coming out. But, all right, Orbit War. This is something called Fantac. This is some weird little game where you're circling around a planet and you're doing some kind of tactical spaceship combat. I don't remember much about it at all. I know I've played it. I don't remember much. Outreach, SPI game. This is part of their big trilogy. I didn't like this too much of space games. The object of this game is to improve your civilization level by exploring the galactic core and eliminating your opposition. Mainly, this is a game where you're not doing a lot. You're moving around, maybe you find something, you get some points. If you find an autonomous force, you get to kind of do this diplomacy table stuff. Largely, it felt very long and not terribly interesting to me. I'm trying to see, someone gave it a big old 8, and I don't know why. TSR's Planet Busters. This was a cute little card game, came inside of one of the Dragon magazines. I remember kind of liking this, but then on second playing, when I actually got it to the game table, once it got recorded, as opposed to, oh hey, look, I mean, this may have been one of the better games coming out of Dragon magazine, actually, but it's still only ranked a 4 from me. Rescue from the Hive, this was, and that was a thing, you know, those Dragon magazine games, largely I would pull them out and I would say, oh, okay, and I'd play them, and they'd be okay, but they just did not compare to what I was getting from the, you know, SPI magazine games. They weren't meant to. These were little throw-ins to what was, you know, really a role-playing magazine. And some of them were cute. None of them were that great. Going to one of the Ares games, Rescue from the Hive, it's kind of a cute game. It's an ambassador and his daughter, and they're being held by bugs, and you have to kind of break in, find them, and rescue them. And really actually nicely detailed, I think, for something so small. It worked pretty well to me. I can definitely recommend it. Now, for some reason, I have Rocketville in here. Rocketville probably shouldn't be science fiction. It should just be under fiction. A political game covering... Well, it's got robots and stuff. Why not? Okay. It's a political game covering the races for a particular town. It doesn't really need the science fiction theme aspect at all. It's kind of a cute little game. I should do a video on it. It looks like I have. So that's probably a better place to hear my thoughts on it, because I think it was kind of interesting, kind of cute, but it needs a little tweaking. Space Empires 4X. This is Stellar Conquest revisited, polished up, buffed, make it a little bit more playable, but took away some of the key elements from Stellar Conquest. In particular, population growth is handled really, really simply in this. And in Stellar Conquest, population growth was this annoying calculation, but it was kind of unlimited, which is to say a planet had a certain limit to its population. I'm not sure how realistic Stellar's was. This one may be more realistic, because in Stellar's, you have this certain population growth based on the population you have, and then you can send them into space, and they have to land on a planet and start over with a new colony. But their whole population, whatever you sent out there, can go. So very large planets can keep shooting off decent-sized population in colonists. And they have population growth for the people who are living on the planet as well, which is kind of nice. But when you start thinking about it, you think, well, you know, I got stellar drives. Why do I really need to, like, grow my population naturally? Can't, you know, shouldn't I be able to do that in a different way? And that's kind of one of the, okay, that's the biggest detailed piece about the economic system over on Stellar Conquest that Space Empires doesn't have. Either one, though, you get to explore. You move into hexes. Space Empires does it better. Every hex has got something interesting in it. And some of those interesting things aren't just planets. In Stellar Conquest, you're seeking planets. You know that but here's the thing. There's a difference in what you know. In Space Empires, you're flipping over a counter, and it could be anything. In Stellar Conquest, you're planning on there being a planet. There are so few stars that could have planets that you make your risk assessment and you send out colonists, everything, off for a far trip before you know necessarily what you've got there. And that's kind of a different feel to the two games. I like Space Empires a lot, but I still don't feel like Stellar Conquest has been completely surpassed by it. Starfleet Battles, I talked about it a little bit in the Fed and Ump, and that's a monster thing to do the two together. But SFB itself, it's one of those weird games. I loved playing it. I loved thinking about it. I loved living and breathing it. But I never really respected the game very much. It's always been kind of okay, you've made stuff up. It's not really true to the show. It's not really believable science fiction here. When they added they started making the Federation too much like the U.S. military, U.S. Navy, with the carriers and all these different things that felt very different from the focus of the original game or of the television show, or anything really. Some people who apparently seem to be Navy aviation buffs got too much control over the game in that. And I don't know that fighters are a bad idea, but some of the scenarios, like Tomcats over Libya, but a whole bunch of things in it just pointed too much to the, we're America and we're going to... Hey, it definitely was a bit of a turnoff. On the other hand, at the same time that was happening, the Hydran race was introduced, and those were my favorites of all. Not just because they looked like trash cans, but because of their combat style being, I'm going to come up there, I'm going to get so close to you, you're going to rip the innards out of my ship as I'm closing, but with half my weapons left, I'm going to take you out, bastard. I'm just going to come in your face and I'm going to hurt you so bad. And I loved that attitude. You could have said the Lyrans have sort of the same attitude, but they don't. And I found very little could withstand a Hydran fleet that's committed to attack. The problem is when you start adding repair rules to the game in the Fed and Emp system, well, that Hydran fleet is going to get hurt real bad when it comes in. Anyway, that's just... Star Force, three-dimensional strategic simulation of space combat. This is an SPI. This is Star Force Alpha Centauri. Uses pre-plotted movement and semi-hidden units. The advanced game has a tactical three-dimensional system. I don't remember much about this. I have not played this much, if at all. Like God's Fire, this is one of those... this is a really cool idea. Now, I'm pretty sure I did play Star Force. I remember the pieces being on the board. I remember struggling with the tactical combat system and finally getting it. And then not being terribly impressed with the whole effort. Like, it was so much technological, so much effort intellectually to grasp this game, and then it just didn't do it. Star Force Terra, 3W. Oh yeah, this is a card game. Feels kind of like Naval War. There's die rolling and stuff in it. Well, funny die rolling. But it's kind of a kick. I thought it was kind of better than Naval War. I gave it a kind of crappy rating of 4, but other people seem to really like it. Starship Troopers, the Avalon Hill game. This can be such an amazing experience. Unfortunately, it doesn't play well solitaire. I don't know if I can do this well solitaire at all. But in the best of scenarios, and it has this stupid programmed instruction system to it, in the best of the scenarios, more advanced ones, you've got all these fancy weapons and everything. But basically what you're doing is you're hunting the bugs underground. You're up above ground. You're looking for their tunnels. And they're plotted and they're digging them at the same time. And it's really this high-tension atmosphere. Now, I played one really great game of this, and that's all that I played that was really fantastic. Every other time I played it wasn't all that enjoyable. And the one time that I did play, we played it out to the bloody end, and I was playing the bugs, and the guy hunting for me, he was just a couple hexes from my queen, and I popped something up where you didn't think it was possible I could be, and then ended up bluffing him completely, and he went over to a different area and started digging because he was under this tight timeline and he had found nothing where I was. And then when I revealed what had happened at the end of the game, he was just, so flabbergasted that I had managed to completely bamboozle him that way. Stellar Conquest, this is such a classic, but it's going to be tough if I set this up for people who look at SE4X and say, the components are just they're this kind of washed out, simple. There's not as much to it. The tech trees are tiny comparatively, but there still are things to this that aren't done anywhere else as far as I know. Struggle for Galactic Empire. This was a solo game. I thought it was okay for a solo game. I'll get this to the table at some point. I actually rated a 6, which is not bad for me in solo games. Solitaire, though, I just don't enjoy it that much, and it's going to be hard to get a designed for solo game to get a good rating. Sword in the Stars. This is an SPI game based on Empires in the Middle Ages. It's the same system, basically. A few little twists to it. I don't like this anywhere near as much. This got rated about a 6 by me. It just doesn't carry over well, mainly because the event cards have become chips, little chits, and they just aren't... That really hurts it. The movement has become less fixed. Like in Empires, you're on sort of this map. You're on a map, and to get from A to B, you have to go through anything intervening. Well, in this one, you sort of do and you sort of don't. Biggest hurt though for me on this, well, 2 of them. One is there's this concept of an empire that in most of the scenarios has existed for a while, but in the campaign scenario, and that's where my low rating actually comes from for the most part. In the campaign scenario, the empire is being carved out, yet it's already printed on the map, and the voting areas are based on that. Obviously, you could twist the game, you could tweak it, you could say, okay, we're changing how this is going to be played to handle it, but you kind of wish that the game designers had stepped back and said, the campaign game doesn't make sense as written. We have to write a new campaign game. We have to write some new rules for it. Another one is the campaign game just never quite takes hold in the same way that Empires of the Middle Ages does. Empires of the Middle Ages, you have this growth of an empire and then a fragmentation. Okay. Well, change the angle a little bit there. Just want to confuse people as much as possible. So, one thing, I don't know when it blew off, but yes, we were talking Sword in the Stars, but I've also got quite a bit left here in the science fiction realm. Let's keep going. Throne World, I did this one. It's a Tim Jim game. I think it worked out pretty well. Good, solid, basic, exploration and conquest type game. Space Empires is better. Stellar is probably better. It's interesting, it's good, but it's I got too much of that Amoeba Wars feeling from it. Too much felt fixed in place. Time Agent. There's another Tim Jim game. Now this one is actually, I think, the best time war type game. Mainly because you have these little paths running through the board, and your goal is to break those. It becomes more of a geometrics game than maybe you're used to with time games. It doesn't necessarily feel terribly like a lot of the time kind of fighting games like Quinto's Time War and some of the others, but here's what it manages. It manages to present something kind of believable where you have multiple races, starfaring races, but technologically competent enough to actually be involved in this time war, and they have their own goals and their own interests, and they want to represent them on this kind of web of a map to present the link ups that they need to provide a permanent success. It's also not trivial where you send your people and what you do. There's a lot of thought process involved in that, and I think it's actually a pretty damn good game from what I can see. I haven't played a lot of it. I've only played it twice in my life. Once solitaire, and I see a lot of promise in it. And once before that, where it convinced me I want to buy this, but I couldn't figure out what the hell I was doing or what was going on. It's something called Time Control by Thompson Industries. I think I got this sucker for free. The rules as written make this game unplayable. This involves waves and solutions on each other's timelines, waves of problems and solutions on each other's timelines. I don't remember how this plays. It had the promising answers of being maybe the time war game. But it just didn't work. It didn't play. And I don't think that it was... I think it had hints of it, of what the answer might be, but it didn't aim in it strongly enough like something like Popes and Princes does to say, I can see what the game would be like. I may not have the effort to develop this game, but I can see where it would be. I don't remember that happening in this, which may be why I gave it a 2. I don't know. Time Pirates. I played this with my wife recently, and I played it solitaire as well. This is really a Euro. You're running around trying to avoid the police, the time police, and pick things up and create sets. And it's a cute little system, but it's not something that I think, I don't know. It doesn't really matter what the theme is, right? Time Tripper. This is an SPI game. I was so excited about this when I first read about it. This was actually the first of the Time War games that I got, or that I wanted to get. I'm not sure if I didn't get it for many years after that. When I did finally get it, and I tried to buy it with some kind of coupon I got from my subscription at first, and that just didn't work. Like SPI, I don't know if you have to match those or what, but I just never got my game. I mean, I sent it and I didn't get it. I didn't get any explanation of, no, you can't use it that way. Here, if you want to use it, and here I am, I don't know, 14, 15 years old. Certainly probably helped prevent me from sending for my ambush game to be fixed and made right from Victory Games. That kind of experience with a game company. And, but anyway, this one was, once I actually played it, it's a terrible game. You're just bopping around through time, shooting up random monsters. And that's really it. Until you can, bop out of that period again. Yaquinto's Time War, this was the first, as far as I know, of the kind of... It had this big concentric set of circles with sort of positionings that all the pieces were in. And they were in this straight line indicating the modern time. You got points of some sort or another for moving them around, but you didn't want to set them in a particular configuration, from what I remember. And it had these waves where if you did something very far in the past, you would shift everything in the future the same direction. Great. Excellent idea. But nobody really desired a particular pattern. You were just trying to... You were getting missions to go change something in one direction or another. It did not matter. You weren't aiming for the strategic goal here. Whereas otherwise, you were running the strategic operations here. You had this computer that you're investing in. You have manpower you're investing in, training, different time machines, all kind of stuff like that. Yet, you're not the one who's trying to decide what the overall strategy of changing the time values is. That was the big complaint on this one for me. Showed a lot of promise, fails in the execution because of that one issue, and fails pretty badly I end up giving it a 6 for effort, really. Triplanetary, this is a GDW game. Vector movement, some race games, some combat games, all set in our solar system. Much, much simpler than High Frontier. You're not worried about the same kind of, it's not going to be the same kind of effort as High Frontier. Your main worry here is the plan that you're trying to affect rather than actually affecting that plan. In High Frontier, you spend all your time trying to make the damn game work, right? You're trying to, draw the right rockets that you can do what you want to do. You're trying to put the pieces together. You're doing all these gamey things to make it so you can do what's really, even if it's rocket science, not that complex once you start dealing with just the movement itself. Triplanetary, though, simplifies the movement quite a bit, but it also doesn't it freezes time as well. Let me ignore that. The only game that doesn't is Battlefleet Mars, and Battlefleet Mars is the game you want to play here, I think. Except it doesn't handle the movement as correctly as High Frontier does either. So, there's kind of this, there's no good answer here. Okay, Twilight Imperium, this is Fantasy Flight. I have Twilight Imperium 3, I have it written down just as Twilight Imperium, but I think it's important to say I have 3 because maybe I would have liked one of the other ones. I wasn't impressed with 3. It felt like a big, complex, overly painful Euro. Not just because of the role selection. Just everything in it, it didn't feel terribly, well-themed the way, say, Space Empire 4X does. And this is kind of a problem I'm seeing with the modern Ameritrash. It's too influenced by the Euro stuff. It's, in some cases that works okay. Warrior Knights, it worked okay. In this game, man, it just created a headache for me. I know it's really popular, but Avalon Hill's UFO. This is a weird little game. The alien player is trying to capture the Earth by landing 5 UFOs on the planet. And the Earthling has to kill these off to prevent it. Has to kill at least 4 of them. You're basically trying to land on each other using throw of dice. There's hidden aliens, Earthling space stations that move around. I played this a few times. I thought it was actually okay. I gave it a 6 because it's an interesting little easy strategy game. Venus Needs Men. I did the vid on this sucker. This is not... It kind of reminds me of that last one. This is a game where all these different planets are trying to seize Earth's population and suck it up to their own planet so that they can get, Earth's population. And they have different abilities and different powers, and then there's all these little cards that give you other little abilities that are, one-shot, say. And then there's technologies which add to your abilities. The Earth player is in almost the same role. He's trying to suck his population into this hidden underground place, bunker. And whoever sucks the most Earthlings ends up winning the game. And it's kind of interesting. You shoot each other up. I did the video on it. It might be worth looking at if you're at all intrigued by the idea. I didn't think it played out well enough to be really worth hunting down, though. Voyage of the BSM Pandora. This is an SPI game. This was one of my favorites. The few solitaire games I really love. You have a ship, the Pandora. You're out to collect rare critters and evidence of other civilizations out in space. And you land on planets and you begin to explore them. It uses a paragraph system. For that, because it's an Ares game, there weren't a lot of pages for it. It ends up having a fairly limited number of events that happen. But I think this showed, really, this was the first of the paragraph system games. And this one showed the wonder of the whole possibility. And I don't know if if it's lived up to it anywhere else. Maybe once you start getting too big with it, it's not a matter that it doesn't show the wonder anymore. It's just that it becomes so much effort to write it and put it all together and get it working that it loses some of the spirit and just isn't as exciting. And even with huge books, like we see with Tales of the Arabian Nights, there's not that much replay value. So there's a lot of design effort into something that really doesn't last long. Voyage of the Pandora, I like to break it out every few years. You get to select your landing party is sort of the big thing. And you've got to pick it on weight and on equipment that you're taking, the terrain that you're landing in, and what you really hope to do. And you're trying to pull stuff up from there. Time is running against you. You have a certain amount of months to complete your mission, or days, or whatever. And some of that's spent in transit time, but some of it's spent, well, exploration doesn't cost you anything, but healing between missions would. So you can't just send another exploration mission down right after the first one. Cool game. I now have the Wreck of the Pandora. Somebody was very kind and sent me a free copy of that for just postage. Great opportunity. I've wanted that game for a long time. I still haven't gotten to play it. Metagaming. Hey, we're on to metagaming here. Warp War. Okay, this is a weird game, and I may have played it wrong all along. Tiny little box. Has like, I don't know, maybe like 9 planets on the board. The board's about this big. Really dull tones, the ships, simple things. You design them yourself, kind of like a Starfire type game. Maybe Starfire's so much better, I gotta get a copy of that. But you design your ships yourself, you fight them out in... The combat has no luck, but there's no luck in Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors, right? I mean, it's one player's choice against the other, but they're uninformed choices. So it's still a random thing. It's not exactly luck. That's what you have here. But, like with a lot of games that have a Rochambeau type system in them, you're not just worried about... It's not simply, rock, paper, scissors. There are advantages and disadvantages to each pick. And in this particular case, missiles travel at a certain speed. Your ship may be limited in speed. So basically your guesstimates here are what you set your missiles at, what you set your ship speed at, and who has what beam weapons and what not. So how you construct your ship determines what kind of strategy you go into combat with. What your desire in the combat is. Do I want to be going much faster than he is? Do I want to be going his speed? And it also affects the bonuses on your ships. So that if you're going a little faster, I think you get a bonus in combat with beam weapons. But if you're going too much faster, you're going too fast and you can't hit him at all. Anyway, it's an interesting system. The problem I had with it was, and I may be wrong about the victory conditions for this. The victory conditions are kind of stated as you need to hold, I think, 3 planets. Well, is it you hold a planet for a turn and you get a victory point? This is enemy home planets. In which case the game is very winnable and is short. Or reasonable sized. Or is it, do you have to hold all his home planets? Because if that's the answer, and that's how I used to play it, the game is essentially unwinnable. Because the enemy player can be stockpiling points. As you invade him, he's building newer, higher tech ships to defend himself from you. He defeats you, fine, maybe it waves back across, but it just became this incredibly long game that I don't think I ever finished. But I'm not sure I was playing it by the right victory conditions. I was young. It's got some nice ratings. I gave it an 8. I think I might up it if the victory conditions were wrong. But on the other hand, it wouldn't be as epic if the victory conditions were wrong. Okay, I did Shot on Ink. This is just a Euro game, mining the moon, whatever. You can look at it. Merchant of Venus. People we're into the science fiction economic. This is a big, exciting game for some people. Personally, I never much saw it. It's a roll of your movement, pick up and deliver type game. It's got some interesting features, some changing malleability to the board, neat technologies. The more advanced rules you add to it, the more broken the game kind of becomes. If you start adding combat to it and everything, it stops being as good a game, I think. Anyway, this is something I got to get to the table sometime soon. I didn't give it a humongously great rating, but I know a lot of people like it. I find it a little bit of a pain to remember all the deliveries I'm planning, because you're making these route plans as you're traveling. What's kind of cool is the stuff that shows up is stuff that follows a pattern that you can see on the board. The pattern's new in every game because they're randomly placed in different locations. And the patterns run out and they change as you're going. These are the things that I think make it exciting, because you can optimize your routes, you can figure out what you're doing, but then it all changes and you have to do that work again. You can't just sit on what you've figured out. SPI Star Trader. Okay, this was a glorious system. This was actually sort of designed as the economic system for Universe. Now, it fails because all it ends up being is the economic system for 6 planets, and then kind of oh yeah, and you can do this for any planets you like. Okay, maybe, but you had a simple kind of comprehensive economic system over on the Traveler universe that came out in Merchant Princes, and actually the original book had sort of an economic trading type game. Well, Universe didn't come with that, and this was their answer. They put out a board game for it. And it's a cool board game. It's kind of like Executive Decision in terms of, not in terms of bidding to buy and produce stuff, but bidding to buy and sell goods. So if you produce iron ore somewhere on a certain market, you can sell that iron ore on that market, but it's probably worth garbage there. You could probably get nothing there. But if your ships haul it to another system, you can probably get good value there. And meanwhile, you're producing it, while some other people are also producing it, maybe not even players, so it's got a market value on that planet, and you can buy it up on that planet as well, just because it's available. So, you're dealing with all these different factors of an economy. You're dealing with the transportation level, you're dealing with the production, you're also dealing with the market itself there in the economy. Nice little game, limited in scope. It's not trying to do something like Crusoe's Planet, but it's definitely an interesting game. 2038, this is XX Goes to Space. This is like 1870 in that it runs too long. The route calculation in this is the most painful of any XX game, but some of the ideas are so cool because you've got exploration in this. You have to send your ships out and see what kind of asteroids and whatever you find. And depending on what you find, well, that may be what you ship. Different companies have different bonuses transporting different goods. Different locations have different bonuses receiving the goods. You have a bunch of minor companies. It actually feels like a cross, but it feels most like 1835 because you've got these minor companies that can be converted into major companies. It's got some neat mechanisms for handling that. It's one of the cooler of the XX games, but it's in space, and it takes painfully long, painful decisions. Return of Stainless Steel Rat. This is another SPI game, mystery game, science fiction mystery. Solitaire or 2-player using a paragraph system. Somebody's been killed on a spaceship, space station, and you have to figure out who's responsible for basically turning the space station into a living trap, and who's got this ill plan. And it's done with these chits and counters and all this kind of stuff. Mainly you're experiencing through the paragraphs. You get, like in Voyage of the Pandora, to pick your equipment and decide what you're going to carry and what's useful to you. And you can drop stuff off as you go. So it's kind of like this role-playing paragraph system. Works kind of nicely. It's not as good as most of the other paragraph systems I've seen. Some cuteness though. I got some role-playing games very, very briefly. Just flip through them. I don't know. I didn't touch the 20th century role-playing games. I've talked about things like Traveler. Paranoia is one of the ones that really, really sticks in my head because A, it's funny as hell, and B, it's got a fairly realistic system. Traveler and Paranoia are two of the more realistic role-playing games I've seen. Traveler, why? Because you're not just collecting skills all over the place. Universe, people used to love Universe because it had... Okay, well, very briefly, so people complained about Traveler's skill system because you couldn't advance the way you could in the role-playing games they were used to. Well, if what you're looking at is something where people, are talking about the kind of skills that they have in it, like Doctor, where the first level, allows you to be a medic, but by level 3 or 4, you're a surgeon. Well, these things take years to accumulate, and that was the concept here. These skills that Traveler encompassed were skills that really weren't things you just picked up on the fly in general. Now, granted, though, you do pick up firing a weapon very quickly, and that's where for a simple system, okay, look, that's why they came up with the 0-level skill where there's some things that you can learn that you can get rid of your non-proficiency penalty. That makes sense. But overall, the system didn't take everything into account equally and perfectly well. And that's life, Much, much more complicated systems, like Space Law, that I have, could be tweaked to handle this, where the skills really do reflect that, but given that you get most of your points for killing things in the Space Master and Space Law and this, that, and the other, well, you don't really become a doctor that way, right? Traveler had the wonderful idea that when you're studying a skill, or when you're not studying, but when you're building up your body or your reflexes or whatever, you're just focusing on that. It may not be everything you're doing, but it's a significant part of your life. You're also adventuring at the same time. But this is, a significant amount of your free time is spent playing around or thinking or reading or working on something. And after, a year? You get a level in it. How simple can that be? And how almost much more realistic than most of these systems. Hey, I shot some things, therefore, or I traveled, therefore I became better at reading, or at surgery. I don't know. I used to impose, training and certain additional requirements, but still, when it came down to it, what did you get out of a Rollmaster type game? Well, I killed some stuff. D&D, hey, no different, man. I killed some stuff. Some games like RuneQuest would handle sort of the, all right, we're going to handle each skill, and this is how Universe did it. So let's talk the Universe style. Each skill is its own little thing, but just by using it, you can get better at it. That's a reasonable thought. You do get better by using something, but maybe not necessarily under pressure. Maybe you get just as much better by practicing something in safe and sane and educational environments as you do in the field. You gain other things in the field. And I've got a lot of thoughts on, how a role-playing skill system should be when I was trying to develop this ultra-complicated, ultra-realistic, in the sense that, it's believable, combat system, character system. Combat system, too, but that's goal was more make it speedy, yet believable, and detailed. And then I threw that all out after I ran into, say, the vampire role-playing games, which, I'm like, Vampire, Amber, a couple other much lighter systems. I started saying, it doesn't matter. I don't need all these systems. I don't need this verisimilitude to have a better time. I can have more fun playing these games out with more of a story aspect. And that's kind of where the whole argument went. Paranoia in particular, interesting skill system, at least the first edition. And the combat system was very nice. Very, very abstracted in both cases. High level look at things. I know some people found that too much still, but for me it was, this very simplified system compared to the Rollmaster type stuff, compared even to the D&D in terms of the combat system, because you're not rolling to hit, rolling damage, rolling to hit, rolling damage. Your to hit damage is on the level of the Azanti High Lightning. Oh look, I gave him a light wound. Oh my, I disintegrated him, Alright, I babbled around role-playing for this for no good reason. Let me load this one up. It's going to be a monster.